U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with top diplomats in Australia on Friday, along with those from Japan and India. The so-called Indo-Pacific Quad is the club's fourth ministerial-level meeting. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said on Wednesday that China, along with most countries, upholds the UN-centered international system and opposes the creation of any exclusive clubs. What does the meeting mean for East Asian security, or is it a mere talk shop that drums up troubles in the region? For insights, let's loop in our panelists from most of these countries. For more on the Indo-Pacific, we are joined in New York, Daniel Russell, who's the Vice President for International Security and Diplomacy at the Asia Society Policy Institute in Asia. In New Delhi, we are joined by Sitrapu Uday Bhaskar, who is the Director of the Society for Policy Studies. In Tokyo, Yoshikazu Kato, Research Fellow from Rakuten Securities Economic Institute. Last but not least, in Shanghai, Shending Li, Professor from Institute of International Studies, Fudan University. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let me start by asking you, Mr. Russell, how is the U.S. trying to balance its priorities at this point?
Well, I think you're referring probably to the security challenge in the Russia-Ukraine border. The fact that the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, is traveling now in the Pacific. He's in Australia. He'll be going on to Fiji, I think is evidence that the U.S. government is capable and determined to deal with a whole range of challenges.
How is the U.S. right now, given your experiences in Washington, likely to balance the different priorities diplomacy-wise? Mr. Russell, what is, in detail, do you think, how is that balance likely to be taken?
Well, you see the balance between the short-term urgent challenges and the longer-term challenges and priorities. That includes things like climate change and development and global health, but it also includes finding a way for the U.S. and China to peacefully and constructively coexist. We've had a lot of trouble finding that way forward.
Mr. Bhaskar, tell me more about how India now is looking at the overall situation and see Washington struggling with its domestic issues and also diplomatic priorities.
India is looking at both the Indo-Pacific region and the larger global scenario in a very careful and calibrated manner. If you recall, the Quad came into existence in a de facto manner in December 2004 when we had the tsunami in the region. And the same four countries, which is India, the United States, Japan, and Australia, had come together organically to deal with a regional crisis. From 2004 to where we are now, India and the United States now have a closer partnership, which was enabled by the civilian nuclear deal of 2007-8. Within the region, as you're aware, the Indian Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, is currently in Australia. And the same four countries which had met at the summit level in a virtual manner are now looking at ways and means of taking forward this engagement. And as Mr. Russell pointed out, there are a number of issues which need a collective approach. And India's own emphasis is on practical solutions to current challenges, to be open, to be creative, and not to suggest that the Quad is only driven by security or that it is specifically aimed at any one country, in this case, China. But they're very concerned about this might is right orientation of global politics.
Many wonder the might is right, that kind of, how shall I say, concept or conception. Who invented it? But putting that aside, let me go to also you, Mr. Kato. What about for Japan? How do you read, the situation in the Asia-Pacific, and how does Japan look at its role right now, knowing the realities in the U.S. and knowing the neighborhoods as well?
Sure. Japan obviously makes a point of Indo-Pacific quite well, and Japan is going to hold a Quad Summit this year. So it's a very important preparation in Australia. And I think now, a lot of crises, like Mr. Russell pointed out, short-term challenge or a long-term challenge, and crisis would happen in the world. Sometimes in Ukraine, sometimes in Iran, maybe sometimes in Ukraine Peninsula. But I think what is important is we need to get together and share our interests and crisis perspective among like-minded nations. And Quad is a kind of mechanism. Obviously, looking at CPTPP or RCEP, Japan has been not that happy to see the U.S. withdraw from TPP, and India did not enter RCEP. But it's okay. What is important is a lot of mechanisms are overlapped. Or somehow differentiated. But what is important is we need to strengthen this network and to share our concept and perspective on how to tackle these global crises or challenges. So in this sense, I think this time, for countries, for democracies in this region, we need to discuss and share what is challenges and how should we prepare over the year and even beyond. This is how Japan sees the current Asia-Pacific issues.
Not exclusive. That seems to be the key word I get from you, Mr. Kato. Let me go to you, Professor Shen, also about that. China's neighborhood, there's something called the Indo-Pacific. Of course, China feels anxious about that. However, how do you see the evolution now of this grouping, shall we say? And how do you read the other three gentlemen's explanation about where their own country is in terms of these Quad, so-called?
It's very interesting. We share the same idea and a notion to reject might is right. I think exactly due to this kind of perception, some big country is flexing muscle in this neighborhood. That has created the perception by the Quad members that China might be not legal by doing something. And they perceive China's flexing of muscle showing its will could already threaten or potentially threat the region. Therefore, they need to work together in the name of Quad to promote democracy, to promote freedom of navigation.
China and the U.S. is already in Cold War or new Cold War. Is there any space, maneuvering possibilities still that the two countries might be able to, as the two leaders pledged earlier during their first virtual summit, that they're going to work together on the global issues? Have we seen much actions toward that direction? Under that circumstances, with that backdrop, where is this, the U.S. talks with the other three countries on the overall map strategically?
My perspective, although I'm an American and in the United States, is that the Chinese side, the Chinese government, took the position that China's willingness to cooperate with the U.S. on common global challenges like climate change or global health was conditioned on the United States agreeing to accept and respect China's self-declared so-called core interests, including behaviors and positions that the United States strongly disagrees with. That kind of conditionality, the attempt to trade cooperation for some concession, was unacceptable from the US side because the US view is that countries as big, rich, and strong as China or the US have an obligation to cooperate in the common good, and that cooperation is not a favor to be traded for benefits. Now, I regret to say that since the November 15th virtual summit between the two presidents, there has been very, very little evidence that cooperation is possible so far.
All right.
I believe that the U.S. side wants it, but not in exchange for positions of principle.
Let me also go to you, Professor Shen, on the same question.
I agree with Mr. Russell. China and U.S. still have lots of ideological commonality. They work together to reduce the temperature of the world, somehow at the China's economic cost. And China may be reluctant to do, but China is responding to the U.S. message in a positive manner. But at the same time, I think both countries, due to security dilemma, they work for the best, but it's a hedge for the worst. And China initiated the process. P5, also the nuclear 5, official nuclear 5, announced that the nuclear war cannot be fought and would never be won. And they repeat what Gorbachev and Reagan used to say. This is a good development. At the same time, I see lots of mutual hedge. I try to link the U.S. perception of some of the Quad perception of China's behavior that is viewed as might is right. That China has built some artificial rocks in South China Sea, and China considers that this hurts nobody, and this only defends China's legitimate rights. But other countries may have some difficulty. And China's view, in my personal view, is that this is a certain hedging of the Quad, because the Quad has a content of the Quad is to combine U.S. Pacific Command and with the Central Command, and that make Indo-Pacific Command. In the future, U.S. may view security matter in this region, vast region, in a combined way. And the U.S. military asset in the region may be used in a combined way. And China should view this and prevent the U.S. military asset in Indian Ocean to be rapidly introduced to Pacific region. This is what the U.S. is viewed that China is applying area denial or access denial. China need to have some island in order to deny the U.S. flex a muscle. So China's behavior is to counter the U.S. might of right. But the U.S.'s view, China's behavior of such, is to potentially to undermine the regional security order. And the order is that China has no right to manage Taiwan's future in its own. It has to get the peaceful consent of the Taiwan side. And I think this is continuing in the recent years.
I see.
So the more China will do, will be more justified the making of the Quad group. And the more the Quad will do, will more justify China's the declaration that all its behavior is for self-defense.
This escalation of tensions and vicious cycle, it seems that Professor Shen has been touched on, is giving us ever more concern about what's next in the future. So I want to come back to the other two guests, Mr. Bhaskar and Mr. Kato, both from India and Japan. Tell me more about how that balance needs to be kept in a way.
India seeks harmony within the region, which is why I opened my remarks saying that this is open-ended. This wants to be creative with the current global challenges.
Mr. Kato, please, also from your perspective.
We want to stabilize Japan, our local relation to tackle some regional crisis. So, and including Quad. So now there are three, right? Our top priority with the US, economic tie with China, but we need more. So more, internationalized or regionalized framework is necessary to ensure Japan's interests. In this sense, I think our top priority is peace.
Understanding the other sides might be a very important start to think about the solutions. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much once again. Daniel Russell, Uday Bhaskar, Yoshikazu Kato, Shending Li. Thank you.